What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, undefeated, 3-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, currently the WBO welterweight world champion, Terence Bud Crawford, lets it be known, him and his team, and sends a message to former two-time welterweight world champion, superstar boxer, Showtime Shawn Porter, that if he truly wants to fight. If you don't know, Showtime Shawn Porter has been expressing his interest in facing Terence Bud Crawford, as he stated that that's his number one focus as of right now. He says the fans have foresaw this fight coming, and now they can picture me and Terence Crawford in the ring. I never did, but now becoming a WBO mandatory and the number one challenger, and now the fans demanding this fight and calling for it, it has manifested in my mind, and now that's the only fight and fighter I'm focused on, because it's a fresh fight, it's a new fight, it's motivation for me, and that's the fight I want, is Terence Crawford. This is what Shawn Porter had to say. So Terence Crawford and his team, we know legendary promoter, top-ranked CEO Bob Arum, who promotes Terence Crawford on the network of ESPN, worldwide leader in sports, biggest sporting platform in the world. Bob Arum stated that if Shawn Porter truly wanted to fight, he would have to set a low number of $1 million, or he can let his advisor, PBC, Premier Boxing Champions, advisor and founder, Al Heyman, who advises Shawn Porter, let it go to a purse bid. Bob Arum said he'll allow Al Heyman and Shawn Porter to win the purse bid, thus holding Al Heyman accountable for the purse. With that said, Bob Arum doesn't believe in paying Shawn Porter big money. Actually, he doesn't believe in paying many of these fighters big money, but definitely not Shawn Porter. So he says that $1 million would get it done right now. So this lets it know that Shawn Porter definitely wants to fight. Bob Arum is just not willing to pay Shawn Porter big money. But with that said, Bob Arum stated that. Then Terence Crawford and his team now has let it be known. His trainer, manager, Brian McIntyre, and other guys that's, connected to Terence Crawford, Team Crawford, they stated that if Shawn Porter truly wants to fight, put in the paperwork to be the mandatory challenger, and we'll make it happen, and Terence Crawford will ultimately stop Shawn Porter, no doubt. With that said, Shawn Porter was stating that he truly didn't want to go this route. He would much rather, because of the relationship he has with Terence Crawford, he would much rather them sit down, come to an agreement, negotiate that way, and fight. He don't want to force the fight. He wants it to organically unfold between the two, right? He wants it to be neutral, right? So Shawn Porter, because of their relationship, doesn't want to force the fight upon Terence Crawford. He wants Terence Crawford to agree to the fight. But unfortunately for Shawn Porter, that's not going to happen. The only way Shawn Porter is going to land this fight is if Shawn Porter go ahead and put the paperwork into the WBO and demand that Terence Crawford makes the fight, right? Uphold his WBO mandatory spot. We know the WBO, out of all the sanction bodies, the 4 major sanction bodies, that is, the IBF, the WBO, the WBC, and the WBA, they, more than any of them, uphold their rules, right? They stick to their script, they stick to their rules, okay? With that said, you've seen unified 2-time heavyweight world champion British superstar boxer Anthony Joshua just defeat his IBF mandatory challenger Kubrat Pulev, and he's looking for all British showdown in the UK for undisputed against fellow countrymen, former 2-time heavyweight undefeated world champion British superstar boxer who currently holds the WBC title, Tyson the Gypsy King Fury. But the WBO is making it be known and letting it be known their former undisputed cruiserweight turned heavyweight, who has been had 2 fights at heavyweight against Chaz Witherspoon and against Derek Chisora, that being in the form of Alexander Usyk, who's the WBO mandatory challenger for Anthony Joshua. The WBO lets it be known that if Anthony Joshua tries to go the route of fighting Tyson Fury, which would be a massive fight in the UK, if he tries to go that route prior to giving Alexander Usyk his opportunity, then they will strip Anthony Joshua of the WBO title. Thus, Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury will not be for undisputed. It'll be a unification bout because they are not going to allow Anthony Joshua to just go around and maneuver around Alexander Usyk without giving him his opportunity. And Alexander Usyk stated that he is not willing to take step-aside money. Thus, the reason Alexander Usyk was not happy that Derek Chisora didn't have any padding in his gloves. The ring was smaller than he originally agreed upon, and he felt like Eddie Hearn, Matchroom CEO and promoter, and his manager at K2 Promotions, that they were trying to pull a fast one on him to give Derek Chisora the best opportunity to win the fight against him, thus not having to worry about Alexander Usyk blocking Joshua versus Fury. That's for another story. But with that said, I'm just giving you a quick storyline of how the WBO upholds and sticks to their guidelines and their rules. So with that said, the WBO, is looking at the situation, and they're saying that if Shawn Porter, because Shawn Porter stated, I didn't ask to be in this position. They recognize my talents, my accomplishments, and me as a fighter, and they placed me as the WBO #1 challenger. I'm going to uphold it. If you don't know, Shawn Porter is also the WBC mandatory challenger for Errol Spence Jr., undefeated unified WBC IBF welterweight world champion superstar boxer. But he already fought and lost to Errol Spence. He is also #2 in the IBF rankings for Errol Spence's IBF belt. But Shawn Porter says that's a fight he much rather revisit in the future. He definitely wants the rematch. It was a very close fight. He says that he definitely wants the rematch, but a fresh fight, a fresh beginning, and something new for the fans and something motivating for him is the Terence Crawford fight. So that's #1 priority for Showtime Shawn Porter. So he wants to honor that fight, look to win that fight, and then go into an undisputed match with Errol Spence or a unification match with Errol Spence once again. But he wants to test his skill set, his abilities against Terence Crawford first, and he feels like this is a winnable fight. He says the entire world understands what I'm going to bring to the table. It's up to Terence Crawford to make the adjustments. Thus, the reason why I said that it's exciting for me to see Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter, because Terence Crawford is definitely going to have to make some adjustments. He's going to be pushed to the brink because Showtime Shawn Porter pushes you every second of every minute of every round, right? He doesn't take a break. He's coming. He's going to come some more, and he's going to come again. He's well conditioned. He don't take breaks. He's never getting tired. He's going to test you mentally and physically. This is why I want to see Shawn Porter versus Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford is widely considered the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Heavy as the head that bear the crown, just like Floyd Mayweather fighter in yesteryear fighters that was pound-for-pound kings. Andre Ward, Floyd Mayweather, so on and such. Those fighters were demanded to see them against the absolute best. You want to see them tested against the absolute best. And here's the same situation we have with Terence Crawford and Shawn Porter. We want to see Terence Crawford tested with the absolute best. It has nothing to do with disliking or not approving of Terence Crawford's style or who he is as a fighter or any of those things. It's about heavy as the head that bears the crown. And you want to see Terence Crawford in there with the absolute best. You want to see him tested. You want to see him in there with at least 60-40 fights. Not so many mismatches as he fought. And Jeff Horn, you give him a pass because that was his debut at the welterweight division. Jeff Horn was a big welterweight and had come off a victory over Manny Pacquiao. And here we have another WBO situation. That's a great example, as Terence Crawford was the WBO undisputed champion. He moved up to welterweight, and he automatically got his opportunity to fight for the WBO title against Jeff Horn. So the WBO sticks by their rules, right? And he beat Jeff Horn. He got a pass for that. But then he fought Jose Benavidez. In my opinion, I liked the fight because Jose Benavidez was a blue chip prospect. And he was very big, very rangy. A big test for Terence Crawford, right? Then he fought Amir Khan. No, most people didn't want to see that fight. Then he fought Igis Kavalauskas, was his mandatory challenge. Thus, the WBO uphold their rules. And he had to fight Igis Kavalauskas. Even in the words of Terence Crawford, this is my mandatory challenger. What do people want me to do? Right? So he had to face his mandatory. And then he fought, right now, Kell Brook. But people want to see Terence Crawford. Most of those fights were 50-50. They definitely wasn't 50-50, but they weren't even 60-40. If any of those fighters would have beat Terence Crawford, it would have been one of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport of boxing, just like Andy Ruiz upsetting Anthony Joshua, and just like James Buster Douglas upsetting Mike Tyson. If Jose Benavidez would have beat Terence Crawford, if Amir Khan, Igis Kavalauskas, or Kell Brook would have beaten, not so much Kell Brook, but the other guys, huge upsets if they would have beaten Terence Crawford. That just goes to show you the level of competition that was. That just goes to show you how these guys were viewed against the talent and the skill set of a Terence Crawford. So most people felt like Terence Crawford definitely should win those fights, and he did. So you want to see Terence Crawford in fights where you say, if he loses the fight, it's not so much of a huge upset, but you'd rather just see him going into an immediate rematch, right? You're not so surprised. If Shawn Porter was to beat Terence Crawford, you wouldn't be so it would be an upset because Terence Crawford would be favored going into the fight. But not too many people is going to be so overly whelming surprised that he lost to Shawn Porter. Why? Because Shawn Porter is a great fighter. He's a surefire Hall of Famer. And these are the types of fights that you want to see Terence Crawford in the ring. You don't want to see Terence Crawford in the ring with guys that you know for sure Terence Crawford is more than likely 90% is going to win those fights, right? Whether they're past their prime or he just have such a distinct skill set and talent gap between him and the fighter that if the other fighter won, it would be a dramatic upset. That's not what we want to see. Heavy is the head that bears the crown. You want to see Terence Crawford in the ring with the best opposition. And if you listen to his side, they will tell you that the PBC, Premier Boxing Champions, Al Heyman, advisor and founder of the PBC, their fighters over there are reluctant to fight Terence Crawford, which is completely untrue. Terence Crawford has his sights set on just two guys, one guy in which used to be signed to Top Rank and ESPN with Bob Arum and Terence Crawford. That coming in the former 8-division world champion, former legendary, iconic superstar boxer who currently is the WBA welterweight world champion, Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao. He was signed to Top Rank and ESPN with Bob Arum and Showtime, and HBO, but Terence Crawford couldn't get the fight done. This was been talked about since at least 2014 with Terence Crawford. We're going into 2021, and he's yet to secure that fight. Manny Pacquiao has since left Top Rank and ESPN and Bob Arum and got the money he was looking for. He was looking for $20 million to fight Terence Crawford. Bob Arum was unwilling to pay it. Bob Arum stated and confirmed that he himself blocked the fight. Terence Crawford wasn't able to secure that fight. Then Terence Crawford wants the other fight, which is the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. But at the same token, Terence Crawford will let the world know that he truly don't need a fight with Errol Spence Jr., which is the biggest fight in the sport of boxing, and that he could take it or leave it. It's water off a duck's back in the eyes of Terence Crawford because he stated that he never truly needed Errol Spence. He just wanted to fight. But now he's since grown tired of the talk between him and Errol Spence. So if it happens, it happens. And if it don't, it don't. Well, he didn't grow tired of trying to get a fight with Manny Pacquiao, and this going on 7 years. But just a little over a year and a half, you've been talking about Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, and he's already grown tired with the situation. So with that said, these are the only two fighters that Bob Arum has confirmed that Terence Crawford is even willing to negotiate for. He's not willing to negotiate for the other fighters. Well, those are also legacy fights. A fight with Errol Spence and Manny Pacquiao are not the only legacy fights or big fights for Terence Crawford. Shawn Porter is a big fight. Keith Thurman, former unified WBC, WBA welterweight world champion superstar boxer who was once the king of the welterweight division. Keith one-time Thurman, who only lost to Manny Pacquiao. That's another legacy fight for Terence Crawford. Shawn Porter is a legacy fight for Terence Crawford. So these guys are willing to fight Terence Crawford if Bob Arum is willing to pay these fighters. And Terence Crawford is willing to push Bob Arum to pay these fighters. But he's reluctant to push Bob Arum to pay these fighters to make these fights happen. Instead, in return, he says that Bob Arum is trying to make all the big fights. Well, paying Shawn Porter $1 million flat is not going to get it done. And Terence Crawford and his side know that's not going to get it done. So if you truly want these fights, stop pushing the agenda that these fighters don't want to fight and try to negotiate. Keith Thurman said he didn't even ask for $10 million, but let's just say he did ask for $10 million. Negotiate him down because you paid Amir Khan $7 million and he was far past his prime. So you could come up with a common medium when you're dealing with Keith Thurman for a big, huge fight. Keith Thurman is far more relevant than Amir Khan. And you give Amir Khan $7 million, you can't find a middle ground to find for Keith Thurman. I'm sure Keith Thurman would take $8 million to fight Terence Crawford. You couldn't find that common middle ground? You didn't even negotiate, according to Keith Thurman. They wasn't even willing to negotiate. So we have to stop saying that the PBC fighters don't want this fight, because here you have Shawn Porter saying that he clearly wants to fight. He's Terence Crawford WBO mandatory challenger. He's #1 in the ranking system. But they're saying that Shawn Porter has to do all the footwork to make this fight happen, instead of them and Terence Crawford putting their best foot first and saying, okay, let's make this fight happen. Because Manny Pacquiao has not even acknowledged Terence Crawford, but they continue to say that that's the fight that they want. Manny Pacquiao has acknowledged Errol Spence more so than he acknowledged Terence Crawford. So that's a fight. Shawn Porter's a fight that Shawn Porter shouldn't have to put the paperwork in. This is a huge fight that you should be willing to just go ahead, put your best foot forward, and get this sealed and fight Shawn Porter. But let's see how this all plays out. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed? Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.